Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Where are children serving as child soldiers, often against their will and in violation of their human rights? What is the United Nations doing to help extricate these children from these very dangerous situations? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're taking a look at child soldiers and the deplorable conditions they find themselves in. My guest today is someone who's very involved in this particular issue. My guest today is Ms. Leila Zerrougui. Ms. Leila Zerrougui was appointed Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict at the Undersecretary General level in September 2012. Immediately prior to this appointment, she was the Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General and Deputy Head of the United Nations Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where since 2008, she spearheaded the mission's efforts in strengthening the rule of law and protection of civilians. Prior to her international engagements, Ms. Zerrougui had a long-standing career in the Algerian judiciary and in 2000 was appointed to the Algerian Supreme Court. Mrs. Leila Zerrougui, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
I appreciate you being with me today. Let's start right at the top and talk about your role and your function and your mission as a Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict. What is it and what do you do?
The mandate was adopted for the first time in 1996 by the General Assembly after a study, after what happened in Africa, and specifically what happened to children in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, after what happened in Rwanda. Then the mandate started with a study that was presented by Graça Machel at the time. And then the first special representative of the Secretary General was appointed by the Secretary General to report to the General Assembly, but also to the Human Rights Council. It was in 1996, as I said. In 1999, the Security Council decided that this is also a peace and security issue. Children affected by armed conflict as part of the threat to peace and security in the world, and that's how also we were invited, starting in 1999, to report to the Security Council. And this helped also to shape the mandate, not only as a thematic mandate reporting to the General Assembly on an issue, but also to the Security Council on country-specific situation. And it covers all the violations that affect children in conflict, specifically 6 violations. Recruitment, re-recruitment, and use of children in armed conflict. Then you have also the abduction of children by armed group or armed forces, sexual violence, maiming and killing, attacks on schools and hospitals where children are either treated or they're studied, and then denial of access to humanitarian to protect children that are that need to be protected or to be secured in conflict. This is the scope of the mandate. And our role as representative Secretary General is, of course, the voice of the UN, the voice that speaks with legitimacy, because we have a mandate to report to the Security Council, General Assembly, Human Rights Council in Geneva on the violation that affect children, and to report on the perpetrators that are committing this violation and how we can stop the violation and how we can prevent, if we can, the violation, and how we can help children that are trapped in the conflict to be secured.
That's a very broad mandate,
Yes.
which includes several areas far beyond just child soldiers, that's
Yes.
for sure. And our viewers can go to Children and Armed Conflict, all one word, .un.org to get more information on what we're going to be talking about today. Well, let's talk about the number. There are literally hundreds of thousands of children out there involved as child soldiers, and that figure changes probably every 10 minutes. But how many countries are there that are classified where they're actually utilizing child soldiers?
In reality, we have, it depends also the state, because you are on the agenda and you can get out because problems are solved, the conflict stopped, etc. So we have now 22 situations of where we report to the Security Council on 21 countries, plus the LRA that covered the Great Lake region, where we have one of the 6 violations or more, including recruitment, use, and re-recruitment of children. The recruitment of children is, in fact, a trend when it comes to the conflict that we are following now in many places, even when armed forces are not used to recruit children. When you have a conflict, you see that children are used not only as soldiers, but they could be used as spy, they could be used as suicide bombers, they could be used for retaliation. So when we talk about recruitment is something, but also the use is prohibited. It's an international crime when it is committed at large scale.
It certainly is. Now, you just recently made a trip to Syria and Yemen, both, 2 countries in somewhat similar area of the world, but still very different in many ways. What is the status of each of those countries, and how is the situation in each of them?
Of course, as you said, it's in the same region, but it's different context and different situation. I visited Yemen just after my appointment. It was really in the beginning, and I visited Syria in December and Yemen in October. So it was for me the first field visit. And we did it because we have conflict, and we have party listed on our list. We have, in Yemen, for example, it was an opportunity because we have a peace process. We have the initiative of the Gulf region. We have, and it was for me important to go and make sure that the issue of children is not forgotten, because sometimes people that work on building the peace forget that there is no lasting peace if you don't address the problem of children that suffer during a conflict, even if, for example, is for a small period. Children are the majority in many countries that are affected by conflict, and they are affected, as I said, by several. So I went there to try to address, to make sure that children are taken into consideration. We succeed. We get engagement, formal engagement from the president, from the prime minister, to enter with the UN in a process of action plan to end the recruitment of children, because it was the trend in Yemen. The issue was the recruitment of children. In Syria, it was another context, of course. So I went there because also we have parties that were listed. The government forces were listed for maiming and killing and attacks on schools and hospitals. It's not recruitment at the time. And was to put in place the mechanism, the tool that allow us to report on the violation and to engage with the government to stop the violation, but at the same time to also meet with the opposition. We receive information that they are using children to also reach out to them and to stop the violation.
Now, there have been thousands of young people, hundreds of thousands really over the years, probably millions now if we go back and count several years, of young people who have been forced into fighting as child soldiers. We've seen these horrific pictures of children in the streets carrying AK-47s, and you see the devastation not only of the buildings and what's happened in the vicinity where they're fighting, whatever the case might be, but you also see that there's a devastation that's taken place in the psyche of that person. That child, first off, has lost his or her childhood, and secondly, you have the psychological devastation that has taken place. What can be done to help the child soldier to overcome this situation, or to really reintegrate him or herself as a normal member of a civil society after maybe spending 6, 8, 10 years fighting and killing and perhaps being drugged up? And I think that was a very common technique that some of the leaders used, keep the children drugged up so they weren't sure where they were, but they were going out there to fight. But what can be done to help overcome these psychological traumas of having been a child soldier?
I think, first of all, the most important is to consider that these are victims and to let them understand that they are victims and to work with them to help them to, first of all, to accept what happened, not as perpetrator but as victim, because we insist that those who recruit are the criminals. Those who are child and recruited, they are manipulated, as you said. Sometimes they are forced, and even if they are not forced, they don't have the capacity, the full capacity to decide. So that's the most important, to say, you are the criminals, you have to stop this, you could be prosecuted, and you are the one target, and that's how we put them on the list. And then we push also, if they don't stop and they are persistent perpetrator, we push for their prosecution, and we put them on the sanction list, and we work with the Security Council to make sure that these are the perpetrators. And this is part of the healing, by the way. The second is, as you said, these children went through very violent and very difficult in the moment where they have to enjoy their childhood. They are forced to commit sometimes atrocities, and sometimes against their own community, because some commanders do it in purpose to cut the link between the child and his family, to cut the link between the child and his community. So you need programs that take into consideration this and that's how we try to, first of all, we have UNICEF and other partners working on the reintegration process in the field, and we try also to let, and this kind of discussion help also people to understand, like donors. We are pushing, and that's when we talk about action plan, is an action plan that we put children in the political process, in the negotiation process, and in the demobilization of adults, that they are also taken into consideration, reintegrated in their community, need programs, need way out for them with another life. They need also to be treated. Sometimes the effect of the war is terrible on them. But we have also success story when they are helped, when people deal with them. We can talk about cases. I have a child. I can, if we have time, I can talk about a child I met in Congo, for example. So we can make the difference if we are engaged fully, and that's why in this kind of opportunity, I always say everyone can do something for these children, and it's worth, because they are the generation, the future generation of a country. We cannot stabilize the country if they continue to suffer.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'll be back in just a moment after this important message. Welcome back to our program. Today we're taking a look at children in armed conflict, and my guest today is someone who's very involved in this issue. My guest today is Ms. Leila Zerrougui. Ms. Zerrougui was appointed Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict at the Undersecretary General level in September 2012. Ms. Zerrougui, we were talking about, I don't want to lose that thought. There were several things that you mentioned I want to get back to, but the one you mentioned when you were in the Democratic Republic of Congo and you had a success story. We love to hear success stories. Could you give us a brief overview of what that success story was?
The success story was a child that was abducted while going to school at the age of 11.
11 years old.
11 years old, going to school in North Kivu in 1997, forced to be part of the militia that was fighting at the time, fight with them in North Kivu, and then sent to Kinshasa, fight in Kinshasa, in Bakongo, very far from his family, never met again his family. I don't know what happened with his family because he refused to speak about it. But he was helped after years, he was still young at the time, by people that work on reintegration of children, UN at the time, but also NGOs. He was demobilized from the army, sent to separated from the armed forces because he was in the national army, and went to school again, so restarted his study, finished his study. He's today working on children affected by armed conflict and children, street children. And he wrote a book. We are in contact with him. He is really, when we saw him, we say, we can make a difference because this child was involved in atrocity. He was deprived of, I mean, at 11, you know what's mean. He did not have neither childhood nor his juvenile was stolen from him. So I think we can, if we, you know a child, you can also help him to build the confidence in the society, in the community, in the institution, if you can help him to come out of the suffering that he went through. So these are the kind of story that many of those who work with children, even when you go and help a child that is in the bush, and to get him out, and this is happening daily in conflict, by people that you never met them because they are in the bush working, they are in the field, and we come to talk about the story, they are the one who was making the story. And I was there, and I know so many from our staff, taking the risk, engaging with armed group, sometimes threatened. They have sometimes to go 3, 4, 5 times to the bush to get a child out, or 2 or 3 or 6 or 10, it depends. So that's the work that needs to be helped to continue to be, because the only way that we can make a difference. Children are recruited. That's the nature of the conflict. When it comes to conflict that have, where civilians are involved, where militia, when you are in conflict inside the country, and the government have no control in several areas in the country. So it happened. It is common. It's trend in many countries. So the only way to do is to, because you are the UN, you have a legitimacy, and you can speak out, and you can also use the leverage that you have with the government or with armed group to get children out. And this is absolutely important. And when, for example, I was there, and you see children that are in the bush and find an opportunity to flee, they come to our bases. That means they know that they can come and they are safe. They will not be ill-treated, so they come. And that's why it is important that we continue to hear play our role as the voice of the voiceless, and to say, children are affected, you have to do something about, you have to stop the war, you have to address the impunity, you have to deal with what is happening, at the same time in the field, working on case basis, because these are the small things that make a difference.
Now, one of the tools you have in your toolbox is the list of shame. How does that list of shame work, and how does a country get off of the list of shame?
The list of shame is a list that was requested by the Security Council. It was in 2001 already. The Security Council said, you ask the Secretary General, because it's the list of the Secretary General report, to put those who are recruiting children on the list to be identified as perpetrators, and then see how we can deal with them. And then the Security Council said, those who are on the list cannot get out of the list unless they enter in a negotiation with the UN and have an action plan to end the violation, the recruitment of children. And that's what, when we talk about action plan, is activities in the field, in the country concerned, with the parties that is on the list, to stop, not only stop that we get the children out, but to make sure it will not happen in the future. So we prevent future recruitment, and we stop what is happening. We separate children. We take it. Sometimes it needs to take legislation to enact legislation. Sometimes it's tools that you have to put in place, mechanism, control, check and balance, impunity things, etc. And then we have, later on, the Security Council said not only recruitment and use of children that trigger for listing, but also killing and maiming, but also sexual violence and attacks on schools and hospitals. So now we have on the list about 52 parties that are on our list in 17 countries. They are either armed forces, which mean the government forces, or armed groups.
Now, the children that have been extricated or brought out of these dangerous situations, you mentioned some come out on their own. Others perhaps are more reticent to do that because they're afraid. They're not sure what to expect. They don't know if there will be retribution against them by the military or the rebel group they're working with. And so often, as you mentioned, you have to work with these children and to explain to them, to bring them out and to get them into the repatriation program, the reorientation program. And of course, you do rely upon parts of the UN, like you mentioned UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund. How would you work with a group like that, say, to explain to a young person, a young man or young men, that it's okay to come out? You can get away from this group. We will help you. We will provide assistance. And do you bring in the local leaders, the local military people to help you in this particular effort, or someone in the government, or a variety of other people to intervene to really explain the situation to them?
It depends on the context. And you have also to know where you are working. In the context where sometimes, for example, you have militia that are recruiting children among their own community because they consider that it's normal. At 15, you are an adult, you are a man, you have to fight for your community. So this, you have to sensitize them, to explain that no, they are children, you cannot do that. And it happened also even in the national forces. So you interact with people, you have to sensitize. We always have programs, we explain, and then you have situation where you have people that are doing it in purpose, and they are doing it knowing that this is a violation, that this is a crime, that we try with them, and they don't accept, because children are easy, as I said, to manipulate. They could be sent for. So this, it depends where you are. Then you identify how you work. You use the leverage that you have. Sometimes you use the threat that you are on the list. You could be on the sanction list. You could be prosecuted by international court. You could be, etc. So you use this, and also you also interact, because those who have these children are armed groups. So if you have also to know if these armed groups or our national forces have an interest in a political process. So then you have a leverage to say you cannot have a future if you keep children. So these are the way that we try to work on the ground. First of all, to make sure that the perpetrator will not stop us and we have the opportunity to talk. Now, children in general in the setting, because we are working for long years there. So generally, if they are forced and if they have the opportunity, they knew that we help them. The most important work that we do is with the political leaders, with religious leaders, in the community, to explain this, to explain also that they have to help children to not be involved in conflict, etc. We work, it depends in the context, but in general, the problem is not that children don't come. The problem is sometimes they are prevented from coming, and sometimes we don't have the capacity to reintegrate them because it's also not our own work. We need partners to be involved.
Exactly, you need partners. Well, this is certainly a very important topic. We need to learn more about it, and our viewers can go to childrenandarmedconflict.un.org. But I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
My pleasure. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.